Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Sde Boker campus. I really appreciate those that came here despite the late dinner with a lot of wine and the great temperature that we have here during the day. I think it's above 100 in Fahrenheit. We have a busy day. It will start with my presentation, and then we'll have three presentations of young faculty members representing the three institutes of the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research. Three outstanding young researchers, as you will see. It's going to be just a glimpse on the research that we're doing here. After that, we will have a tour, actually several tours here and at the Ben Gurion Institute for Israel Studies and Zionism. Then at noon, we will meet at the Halperin Student Center, just across the Evans Auditorium, for lunch. And at 1 o'clock, we will be back here for a short symposium about food security. Start with a keynote lecture of Jan Lowe. Is she here? She's here. Here are you. Jan got yesterday honorary degree from BGU, and 2 years ago, she and her organization got the Food Prize in 2016, which is not as important as the degree from BGU, but it's still a very important recognition for really great stuff that they're doing here. So I'm sure it's going to be very, very interesting presentation. And then this presentation will be followed by a discussion by three of our faculty members, led by Professor Aaron Feit, and then Naftali Lazarovich and Shimon Rachmilevich as well. So we have a busy day and we better start. What I will try to do in the time that I have is to talk not only about what we're doing here, but also about the development and progress at our institutes over the years, which I think it's pretty impressive. That's for my opinion. And I was told that I cannot start a presentation like that without saying a few words about myself at least. So I'm following the rules. And I will show it on a time scale like many of the slides in this presentation. So I did my degrees at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in soil and water sciences, focusing on hydrology. In 1999, I moved for a postdoc and then research assistant professor at the Department of Bioengineering at Oregon State University, up in the northwest of the United States. And toward the end of 2001, I had to make a tough decision because really life in the Northwest is really convenient and nice. So the decision was if I want to stay there or for a permanent position or come back to Israel. And the decision was to come back to Israel. And in Israel, there were a few options, and the options that I chose wasn't the obvious one. It was to join a newly established institute, the Zuckerberg Institute for Water Research, which is part of the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research. The institute at that time was on the paper. I mean, there was no building yet. It was just a dream that is coming through. But I really wanted to be part of something new, something dynamic. And living in the Negev was actually a bonus for me. And I think that looking back 17 years, it was really a smart decision because a lot of great things are being done here, and we have a lot of things that we can and we should be proud of. So since 2002, I'm a faculty member at BGU. In addition to research, which is mostly what I'm doing, and teaching, I had some administrative roles. I'm not going to list all of them, but one of them was to be the director of the Zuckerberg Institute for Water Research for 3 years. And then in the summer, in August last year, less than a year ago, I was elected to lead the Blaustein Institutes. This is a big challenge, a lot of responsibility, but I think that a lot of great things are already being done here. And the potential is really huge. So I'm sure that with the BGU management that is sitting here, our president, our rector, vice presidents, and all of you, we will do great. So it's funny because yesterday evening, those that were in the honorary degree and heard Dennis, our president, talk, he used the same sentence that I do. But we are not synchronized, and because he's the president, he can do whatever he wants. He just copy from me. Anyway, I'm not an expert in history or Zionism, but with no doubt, David Ben-Gurion was the pioneer, in his dreams made these institutes. And his dream was to create top-notch research institute of people that are living in the Negev, exploring the Negev, and exploring dry lands. And I think that this is exactly what we're doing here. And I'm quite sure that if you could watch us from his grave that is just 300 meters away from here on the edge of the spectacular Tzin Valley, he would be very proud of what is being done here. Now, if we look on the time scale, in 1963, David Ben-Gurion, our prime minister at that time, was talking about creating a Hebrew Oxford in the Negev as a modern Hebrew Yavne, and established the Midreshet Ben-Gurion, which is the village around us, as an educational center. Almost 10 years later, in 1972, the Israeli Council of Higher Education recommended the establishment of the Institute for Desert Research, and this recommendation was approved by the government just a year later in 1973. In 1974, the first director of the Institute for Desert Research was elected, and this was Amos Richmond, Professor Amos Richmond. And in 1976, the Desert Research Institute became part of Ben-Gurion University when it was really a young institution, I think 6 or 7 years old. Our first conference was in 1978 under the title The Negev, the Challenge of a Desert, and I think that this topic is still highly relevant nowadays. In 1980, the Desert Research Institute became the Jacob Blaustein Institute for Desert Research, almost the same name as it is now. I will explain the difference. In 1984, the Ben-Gurion National Solar Energy Center was established, and a few years later it became part of BGU. We were first a research institute, and since 1990 we became Research and Teaching Institute with the establishment of the Jacob Blaustein National Center, which was at the beginning just for international students with 25 courses here at the institutes. And in 1997, we established the Albert Katz International School for Desert Studies, the modern facility right here, just west of us. And the first student village that was established was a German loan, and it's really a great facility. In 1999, the Council of Higher Education recommended that the Desert Research Institute will enable to provide a master's degree in desert studies. Now we have more degrees, and hopefully in a year or two we'll have even more. I will talk about it. Since 2002, the structure of the institutes changed, and that was with the establishment of the first research institute, the Zuckerberg Institute for Water Research, and just a year later, we had another institute, the French Associate Institute for Agriculture and Biotechnology of Dryland. And in 2004, it was approved that we are not the Desert Research Institute anymore, we're the Desert Research Institutes, and we're functioning as 3 separate institutes. The naming of the third institute, the Swiss Institute for Dryland Environmental and Energy Research, was only in 2008, although it functioned as an institute before. One of the most important conferences that we have here is the Dryland Deserts and Desertification. The first one was in 2006, and I will say a few words about it later. Another way to look on the evolution, on the development of the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research is to see how it is structured. At the beginning, we were small research groups, 13 different small research groups of 2 or 3 researchers in each group. Some of these groups merged into departments, and since 1990, we are 6 academic departments, and this was true till 2005. And since 2005 till now, we are functioning as 3 research institutes, the Zuckerberg, the Swiss, and the French research institutes. Another way to look on the development of this place is if we look on aerial photo and satellite photos. And it was very fascinating, actually, because usually we're too busy in dealing with ongoing problems and issues and thinking about the future, and we never have time to stop and look back. But while preparing this presentation, I looked on a lot of aerial photos, and it's really amazing to see the changes. This one is from 2000. It's just an example. All the places with the question marks are buildings that were not exist in the year of 2000. The Zuckerberg Institute, the French Institute, the Energy Building, the Halperin Student Center, the student villages were not exist. Even the Evans Hall where we are now did not exist. And this is in the year of 2000. And if we look on it now, it's really very different. We have here the first stage of the student village and the American Associate Student Village, and it's really amazing because this one just finished recently, a couple of years ago, and it's already fully booked way before the academic year starts. So this is good news and bad news. The good news is that there are a lot of needs. The bad news is that this is our limiting factor. Now, soon, you see where this tractor is standing, we'll have additional institute that is adding to the Sde Boker campus. It will be this Cindy and Max Mintzberg Ben-Gurion Research Institute for the study of Israel and Zionism that will become part of the Sde Boker campus, and I'm sure that it's going to be a great addition to our campus. Now, a lot of things changed over the years in terms of the type of research that we are doing here, new fields that are updating all the time according to the needs, according to the equipment, according to the future of science. But even in the field that are active from the beginning and still relevant, like solar energy and algae research, we have a lot of changes. And our facility nowadays are really state-of-the-art, top-notch facilities. And I think that we can and we should be proud of what we have here, both in terms of the research facilities and both in terms of the facilities that we are providing for our students. The heart and the engine of the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research from the beginning was our people and mostly our students. We have an international, extremely dynamic group of students, multicultural, really great people, great young people that are here, and this is, with no doubt, the engine of this place. And I think that our multicultural nature from day one is one of the things that make us so special, and I'm sure it's going to stay like that right now. 51% of our students are international and 49% are Israelis. But it's not only students. We also have very devoted faculty members and technical and administrative staff. For most of them, coming here to work every day is way more than just work. People made this place as part of their home, part of their life, and I think that seeing how people work to prepare for the Board of Governors here was just an example for the amazing efforts way beyond what they need to do of the people that are working here. Conferences, I mentioned the first conference in 1978. Since then, we have more than 200 conferences here. Most of them are international conferences with speakers from all over the world, and I think that this is a great place to make conferences. Most of the people here are really amazed from what is being done here. and from the facilities here. And speaking about conferences, again, I'm going to mention the Drylands Desert and Desertification Conference, that next year we are going to do the 7th DDD conference, and this is really amazing conference with more than 500 people coming from all over the world. You see delegations from most of the developing countries. This conference is supported by the United Nations, by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it's the largest conference in the world, I think, that focuses on dryland problems. So I really want to thank you because your support really helped to make these conferences. Courses are also very important for us, and this is kind of a nice picture. One of the first conference here, we had 2 students in the early 80s. Now we have conferences every year. Again, the limiting factor is our ability to accommodate the students that want to come here from all over the world. This is an example for a summer course that is being done here for the last few years with students from China and India, and this year I think there will be students from some other countries as well. As I said, in 1990 we became a research and teaching institute rather than just research institute, and that was started with the establishment of the Jacob Blaustein International Center that was in the building that is now the administration building, just east of us, right there, 20 meters from the Evans Auditorium. We were very small. We had 15 students at the beginning, and now it's a completely different ball game with more than 125 courses, more than 250 students, right now from 21 countries, 3 degrees and 2 on their way, so we'll have 5 degrees hopefully soon. And I think that in the future, this number is going to be more and more because there is a lot of demand for what we're doing here. We are a magnet for delegations, visitors, groups that are coming almost on a daily basis. It's pretty amazing. It's very hard to work because there are always people coming here and want to see what we're doing. Sometimes you feel like in a zoo or something. But these are just some examples for people that you know their names that were visiting here to see what we are doing. Gorbachev, Ted Kennedy, Bush, Elizabeth Taylor, Margaret Thatcher, and more. These are just some examples of people that were visiting here, and it's pretty amazing. Now let's move to what we're doing nowadays. So as I mentioned, we're functioning as 3 research institutes, the French, the Zuckerberg, and the Swiss, with about almost 70 faculty members, 250 students, and about 50 postdocs. Most of them are international, not all of them, but most of them. And I want to go back to some aerial photo. This is from Google Earth that I downloaded. And in the yellow, you see the perimeter of the institutes. This is the Tzin Valley, and I think that from this image, it is easy to understand why we're the Desert Research Institute. There is mostly desert around us. And I just want to mention, this is kind of interesting, this is Neve Boker. This is one of the neighborhoods of Midreshet Ben Gurion, and just recently there was a bid on about 50 lots right here in the 3rd stage of Neve Boker, and on these 50 lots there were like 250 families that were competing on these 50 lots. And this huge demand in the middle of nowhere of people that want to come and live here is mostly because what we're doing here, and mostly because of the activities of BGU and the Blaustein Institutes in this place, and I think it needs to be mentioned. So, talking about that, I'm quite sure that you have seen this slide before in many presentations, but I want to mention it again because I think it is very important. The role of Ben Gurion University in general and the Sde Boker campus for the growth and development of the Negev Desert, which is more than 60% from the landmass of Israel and less than 10% of its population. And considering the really high population density and population growth in Israel, it must happen at one point that more and more people will move here, and then the role that we're playing is really central and essential for the future of Israel. So what are we doing here at the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research? In a very interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary way, and a lot of joint research among the people that are working here, we are doing research that really has a direct impact on the future of all of us, the future of humanity. I believe that our future is not about the development of the next generation of iPhone XR2 or whatever it is, or the next algorithm of Google. I think it is about food security, water scarcity, clean energy, especially solar energy, and ecosystems. And these are exactly the issues that we're dealing with at the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research. And I think it is very, very important. Our mission, really in a nutshell, is to combat desertification and explore global challenges by bringing together water, food, energy, and environmental research. So a few words really, really short about our institutes. So the French Associate Institute for Agriculture and Biotechnology of Dryland is dealing with the need to produce more food for the growing population. And we're talking about 200,000 people that are adding to this world to Earth every day 200,000 people. And by 2050, 30 years from now, we're talking about 9 billion people. And we really need to find ways and major innovation in how we farm and how we feed all these people. And later you will hear a short presentation by Benjamin Rosenthal, one of the young faculty members of this institute, that will tell you a little bit just on a glimpse about the research that is being done at the French Institute. The research at this institute is mostly biotechnological solutions for sustainable dryland agriculture. It is working in two major groups, but I'm not going to elaborate on that right now. The second institute is the Zuckerberg Institute for Water Research, and this institute is dealing with the obvious need for water. And we all need that water is one of the most crucial resources on Earth, probably the most crucial resource, but it's a finite resource. And we're using more and more water, and it is becoming a big problem. In the future, well, the future in terms of water is pretty foggy. And I will just mention a report that was published by the United Nations about 2 years ago, predicting that in 30 years, 45% of the world population will be living under water scarcity. 45% of the world population in 2050, it's about 4 billion people. So it is a huge problem, right? I think you will all agree. And at the Zuckerberg Institute, we are trying to find solutions for our deteriorating water resources, again, working in two groups. And later on, we will hear Oded, that will tell us a little bit about his research, which is an example for the type of research that is being done at the Zuckerberg Institute. And I'm quite sure that you will find that it's really important and interesting. The third institute is the Swiss Institute for Dryland, Environmental and Energy Research. And in this institute, generally, we're dealing with the need to increase the value of drylands to humanity. And when we're talking about dryland, some of us think about some spots in the Sahara, in the Kalahari, and maybe in the Atacama Desert. But we're talking about 41% of the world landmass. And more than 2 billion people, I think the last number is about 2.3 billion people that are living in drylands. And this number is just going to increase and increase because most of the land reserve on Earth is in drylands. So this is an extremely important issue to deal with. So in the Swiss Institute, we're developing, implementing, and disseminating knowledge and environmental technologies in the fields of solar energy, environmental physics, and ecology. Again, working in two major groups. One is focusing on ecosystems, desert ecology, and the other in solar energy and environmental physics. And Merav, later on, will tell us a little bit, again, just an example of the type of research that is being done at the Swiss Institute. Again, although I mentioned it before, I have to go back to the Albert Kastel International School for Desert Studies. The students are the heart of our Blaustein Institute for Desert Research, and we already have more than 700 alumni from 45 different countries. And in this respect, I really have to tell a short story. I can't remember if it was Thursday or Friday. I think Friday morning, no, Thursday, I had a presentation in Philadelphia. And after my presentation, someone from the audience approached me and told me a story. And the story was that about a year earlier, he came to hear a presentation of some high-profile guy from a country in Africa. I couldn't remember. He thought it's Ghana. And he was in a ministry, the deputy minister of something. He couldn't remember the exact role. But he said that this guy talked to the people and told them that he made his master's at the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research and spoke really highly about his time here in Sde Boker and in Israel. And I think that this is really a great example of the type of ambassadors that we are developing here at the institutes from all over the world that are later on going back to their countries and spreading the rumor about the type of stuff that is being done here. Community outreach is really very important for us. It's really part of the DNA of the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research. And a lot of stuff is being done. I don't have time to talk about all of that, but we're working with our schools, elementary school, high schools. I think that it was yesterday evening that was the final presentation of the project of the local environmental high school here that is guided by our students and our faculty members. I was in the meetings of the Board of Governors in Beersheba, so I couldn't be here, but I think that Amit was probably there, and I'm sure it was great as any other year. We are highly involved in that. We are working with the Bedouins around us. We just finished a project that was led by the Zuckerberg Institute with students coming from 2 high schools of Bedouins here in the Negev. Very challenging but very successful project, and we're already working on the 2nd year. I think it's something that we are very proud of. It's really great stuff. I mentioned the summer courses that are being done here every summer, and the demand is huge. We are working with our students in projects in Africa, doing various projects in villages, bringing our know-how to small villages in rural places in Africa, and at the same time exposing our students to the type of problems that are in these kind of places. So to summarize, first, in a very interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary way, at the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research, we are exploring solutions and scientific questions that are really crucial for the future of all of us. And we're bringing together problems that are related to clean energy, water scarcity, and food security in a very unique way. And this is all while we are keeping our society and our environment as a, kind of a leading for our future. Another very important thing that we're doing here is to train and educate the next generation of experts of young people from all over the world in our field. And this is very important. It's really a center of excellence, a hub, an international hub for these fields that I just mentioned. And we are, as I mentioned, creating great ambassadors for Israel. And I think that this is also very, very important for all of us. So I really cannot finish without say a few words about the fact that everything that is being done here could not be done with really a lot of support from the management of BGU, that some of it is new but still highly supportive of us. We have the president, the rector, the vice presidents, and of course all of you that support for many years our activities here. The names here, I'm sure that they're not all the names, but these are some of the names that I got from Jill. So if someone is missing, it's her to be blamed. But it's really just an example of really long-term commitment of many people to the work that we're doing here. And with that, I want to thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Noam, for the introduction, and thank you for being here. And I will introduce myself a little bit. I'm a plant ecologist, so I'm interested in plants and how they are distributed in time and in space. I was born and raised in Haifa, where I started, of course, my career in school and started to study, and also was very interested and fascinated by the environment and nature, which led me later on to go to the Hebrew University and do my bachelor degrees in biology, and continue from there to do a master's and a PhD in ecology and evolution. After I graduated, I continued my academic journey by doing a postdoc in Tübingen University in Germany, where I later also became an academic group leader in the German system, if you're familiar with, and in plant ecology, of course, until the point that I got my position here in Ben-Gurion University. But you don't really need to be an expert in plants in order to notice that it's quite difficult to live here in this environment, in the desert environment. And when you are a plant and try to do that, you need to cope, first of all, with very warm conditions. The land, the soil is going to be highly saline, so it's going to be a lot of salt. It's going to be pretty dry. And then in a snap of a minute, it's going to also be very wet if there was a very good rainfall event. And all that the plants need to cope with. And not only that, but also there is a lot of differences between the years and seasons. This is one of our sites last year in spring, so this is March. And this is the same site this year when we came again. So obviously, there is a lot of difficulties here that the plants need to cope with. So they need to cope with the harsh environment, but also with high fluctuation between years. So this is a problem that the plant need to cope with, but it can also be a blessing, because this can help the plants to work with the one thing that we inflict on the environment, which is disturbances and climate change, because both things are going to be very unexpected and going also to create a lot of extreme events in the environment that the plants will need to go with. And in order to study all that, what we do in my group is first of all, of course, we need to go and study things in the field. So we go to the field, we monitor the plants, we try to identify them, see where they live exactly, and using that, we can then go, for example, in the example here, what we do is we take the plants from the plot and then see where exactly do they grow, and then, for example, here, correlate the information of where exactly do they grow with the information about the soil where they live and find the limitation where they can perform and where it's too much for them. We can also use the same information and then create a spatial distribution of the plants from kilometers to centimeters in order to understand which plants will be able to grow together and which plants will start to compete with each other for the few resources that are there to share it all. But after we do that in the nice condition, actually what you can see here that it can also be pretty cold outside there. But after we are being there, then what we are doing there is we go back to the more convenient environment of our lab, and then we can use the information in order to create trajectories. Those trajectories are usually and often being done by creating a computer modeling. And using computer modeling, where we take the parameter for the field and translate them, we can understand things at larger scales. So the scales can be spatial, when we understand the distribution at much larger scale than what we can do in real life in our small sites. And it can also be temporal, understanding what is happening on the larger scale than the common project with a student, which will be between 2 years and 4 years at the most. And even more, what we can do with this information is that then we can manipulate different characteristics that we know are going to be a problem in the environment. For example, in relation to climate change, we can change the rainfall regime and then see what will happen to the projection of our plants without actually harming the environment that we are working with. Another thing which is convenient when we are going to work inside the lab is the fact that we can then understand the mechanism that lies behind what we see in the observation in the field. So, for example, in relation to the soil condition in which the plants are growing, we can then take the plants from the field into growth room in a very regulated, controlled condition. We can then only manipulate the one thing that we think is important, in this case, salt, and see exactly where the plants are sensitive to soil and why do they react the way that we see eventually the big patterns in the field. Another very convenient thing to do when we are going from the field to the lab is that we can then monitor things that are very difficult to monitor in the field because it's very complex and you perhaps won't see that. A good example for that is the fact that it's very difficult to imagine today, but this is actually a hotspot for flowers and for pollinator insects. And in field, what we can do is we can follow then the pollinator insects, see which flower they prefer, and so on and so forth. But only by bringing this part of nature into the lab, we can, in a more controlled condition, understand what exactly are the signals that are important for the flowers to interact and communicate with the pollinators. So, for example, the color that they create, or what you can actually see here is that we actually capture the scent, the smell that the species emit, and then translate it later on to exactly what creates the specific community of amazing flowers that we see here today. With those examples that I showed you, what I wanted to give you as an overview is the kind of approach that we get in my working group. And what we do is we combine a very deep understanding of the specific nature around us with all sorts of more regulated lab interaction and lab manipulation that we can do only in the lab, and use also computer science and mathematics to create a kind of holistic approach that helps us understand what we see today in nature, and especially to predict what will happen to it before disturbances become irreversible in our nature and surrounding around us. And with that, I want to thank you and leave the...
So hello, everyone. I'm thankful for the opportunity to present some of the work done in my lab. But first, of course, I should say a few words about myself and how I ended up here. So I grew up in a kibbutz in North Israel, not far from the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee once was an important water source for all Israel. Now it is mostly a recreational lake, as we rely mostly on seawater desalination for our drinking water. At the age of 18, I headed south to Nitzana to live in the Negev for the first time. There, during 1 year, I led field trips through the desert and also learned about the great potential and challenge that this unique region has. In 2006, I enrolled in the Technion in Haifa. There I received my degree in engineering and later my PhD in the field of water treatment technology. Then I left with my family to Europe to work as a postdoc. I was very lucky to work with two world-leading researchers in the field of membrane science and technology. First in University of Leuven in Belgium, and then in Aachen, Germany. And when the offer came to join the faculty of the Zuckerberg Water Research Institute, I was very happy to come back to the Negev and complete the circle. And so I came here to start my own research program. For this purpose, I recruited an international team of excellent students. You can see most of them in this picture. Together with them, and with our great technical staff, we have been building our lab. We now run several funded research projects and even had a first group trip. But what are we actually doing? What we do is we build upon our expertise in water chemistry, in membrane technology, and water process engineering. We then use this knowledge to study water treatment processes. We seek better understanding so we can improve existing technologies and develop new ones. By doing so, we aim to remove and prevent water pollution in a cost-efficient and sustainable manner. Often that requires recovering valuable resources from the same wastewater or polluted water that we treat. Through achieving these goals, we want to make a positive impact on issues like public health, environment, sustainable economy, and fresh water and food security. This impact is global. And as evidence to that, you can see it's directly connected to some of the Sustainable Development Goals as defined by the United Nations. I want now to briefly present two of our research projects, but first I want to tell you a little bit about the element phosphorus. Phosphorus is a nutrient essential to all life on the planet. It builds our bones, our cells, and also stores energy in our body. Phosphorus is also a finite resource. We mine it as rocks in mines like that. There's actually one mine here in the Negev. We process it to make chemical fertilizers, which we apply in our fields. Without it, feeding the world will be practically impossible. However, phosphorus deposits are depleting at a concerning rate. So we must find other resources of this important mineral. The other face of this challenge is that traces of phosphorus in wastewater are polluting rivers and lakes by causing algal growth, which dramatically reduces water quality, as you can see in these articles. We are working to solve both challenges by removing and recovering phosphorus from wastewater. We take effluent, which is basically treated wastewater, and filter it using special membranes that removes dissolved phosphorus along with other wide range of other contaminants. And thus we get clean water and a concentrated waste stream. But one of the challenges we face in this process is that when we concentrate the phosphorus, it forms sticky, amorphous crystals which can clog the membrane. In this video, you can see how this crystal grow and attach to the surface. To tackle this issue, we are adding particles to the water before filtration. We found that phosphorus accumulates on these particles instead of clogging the membrane. So in this second video, you can see that the particles we added do not attach to the surface. And therefore, after filtration, we can collect these particles and use them as an alternative source of phosphorus fertilizer. We can also clean whatever remaining on the membrane with acid and use it locally as liquid fertilizer. These images that we took with an electron microscope show that indeed we can significantly reduce membrane clogging with the method we developed of adding particles to the water. The next project I will present briefly involves arsenic. As you probably know, groundwater polluted with arsenic poses a global risk. It can also be seen in this map. Even very low concentrations of arsenic in drinking water could significantly increase the risk of chronic diseases. The problem is especially severe in developing countries, such as India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, but also occurs in Eastern Europe and even in the US, especially in some private wells. In our lab, we are now developing new types of membranes to remove arsenic from water in a more efficient and sustainable manner. This is the work done by Dr. Sanhita Chaudhary. She is a postdoc researcher from India which came here to work on the arsenic problem, which is very pressing in her country. She is now in Chicago working on this topic with our collaborators from Northwestern University. So to summarize my talk, what we do is to tackle global issues by studying and developing sustainable water treatment processes. For example, we enhance water reuse by removing and recovering phosphorus, and we develop better methods to remove arsenic from groundwater. And with this, I would like to finish and thank you all for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Binyamin Rosenthal. I'm a new researcher at the French Institute for Agriculture and Biotechnology. And today I will tell you a bit about the laboratory we're establishing. I will give you my background, what I studied, and also what we're doing now at the Institute. So I was born in the Soviet Union, second brother to 4 brothers, and my parents tried to leave the Soviet Union for 10 years, and eventually during the perestroika that started with Mikhail Gorbachev, we succeeded in leaving and immigrating to Israel. We moved to Kibbutz Ktura in the southern Arava Valley in Israel, where my family still lives today. I did my service in the Israeli Air Force, where today I'm a captain in reserve duty. And the most important, I married the love of my life, Leah, and we had 2 wonderful children. And we had our wedding at Kibbutz Ktura, and you can see the map of arriving to the wedding. It's actually very interesting growing up in Kibbutz Ktura without even knowing that, but I learned a lot about the desert environment and how to utilize it and to use it. Because in Kibbutz Ktura, we have a lot of different agriculture, aquaculture, and biotechnology, including desert agriculture, alga technologies using the algae factory, Arava Institute for Environmental Studies for Palestinian, Israeli, Jordanians, and other Western countries students, Arava Power Company, and also Ardag, the aquaculture factory of 5 kibbutzim in the southern Arava Valley, where my father was working when we arrived to the kibbutz. During my graduate work, I was working on classical medical immunology. I was working on a cytotoxic cell of the lymphatic system, recognizing cells that are in abnormal state, either virally infected or cancer cells. And what is very interesting, that those cells are capable of recognizing our cells in this abnormal state. And you can see here this green fluorescent labeled cancer cells being killed by those cells. So the questions I was asking is how actually the immune system is recognizing its targets. And I think the most interesting project of my PhD was when we discovered a mechanism by which cancer cells are inhibiting the immune system. And for a long time, I could not figure out why a mechanism like that evolved. And I think the eureka moment of my PhD happened when I was sitting in the library and trying to figure out this mechanism and why it evolved. And during that time, we discovered that my wife was pregnant. And what I discovered is that the other tissue, except for cancer tissue that expresses high levels of this cancer-associated molecule, is all the tissue that surrounds the embryo during pregnancy development. And one of the basic questions that we don't know in immunology is how embryo survives the mother's immune system. So I propose that this mechanism is protecting the embryo from the mother's immune system, and a cancer is a byproduct of that. So I got really excited after this project, and I discovered that actually our knowledge and understanding how tissues are getting recognized either in pregnancy or in transplantation, we do not know. And this is when I discovered, and I was looking for a postdoctoral research at the Stem Cell Institute at Stanford, I discovered this unique marine model organism that has natural transplantation phenomena when two different individuals of different genotypes coming together and they share their blood system between them, and we have this natural transplantation. So I started characterizing and working on this organism to understand those different mechanisms. We succeeded in isolating different cellular populations from this organism, including the immune system and also the stem cells, and we developed a transplantation assays that we can follow those different cells from the different genotypes of the organism and develop the whole characterization of its immune system. And you can see here the cells going from one genotype into the other in this natural transplantation phenomena. So eventually working on this organism, which is our closest invertebrate relative, we succeed in characterizing the cellular populations, how they recognize their targets, and also we developed a full model for stem cell transplantation, from the ability of isolating the stem cells, the interaction with the immune system, localization to the stem cell niches, and actually showing how it's homologous to our own stem cell niches and our own stem cells. So what is an immunology and stem cell research lab is doing here at the Desert Institutes? We're studying three different levels of the immune system. One is understanding basic mechanisms of the immune system in different organisms, also using the organisms that are here already under research, either in the aquaculture group or also in the ecology group. We're also trying to understand those mechanisms to be able to manipulate it, either in a medical research or in aquaculture research. And a third one is directly trying to do better vaccinations for aquaculture and developing it, utilizing what we have at the institutes, including the algae and using the plastids of plants. So the idea is here that we succeeded in developing different methods to study the immune system and stem cells of different organisms, and now we can ask those questions about different cells because we utilized species non-specific methods. And this is including examples that we have developed for tuna fish, for sea urchins, and even work that we have done on corals. So specifically, we have some projects together with the aquaculture group, Dina Zilberg, of vaccine development, inflammatory processes in fish blood, and also understanding how pathogens penetrate through the skin of blood, where most of the pathogens are coming from. We also work with other institutes here in this example with Dr. Adas Evlena, understanding the different pathogens that are in the blood of rodents in the desert, including Bartonella and Mycoplasma. And the project that I'm most excited about, that I want to give you just an example, is stem cell therapy for saving the coral reefs. And the idea here is that we succeeded in isolating different populations from corals, including a candidate populations for stem cell. And the idea here is that we will be able to isolate the stem cells from a heat-resilient coral genotype transplanted to a coral that is heat sensitive, and to create a cellular takeover that will be able to resist to a heat stress. And you can see here, this is the candidate population injection to corals. And right now, we brought these sea anemones to our laboratory, where we're starting the proof of concept of those experiments. There's a lot of people that I need to thank for all the research and also my studies. Due to lack of time, I will just mention Angel Porgador, who was my PhD advisor, and Irving Weissman from the Stanford University, who was my postdoc advisor. And of course, I would like to thank you for listening to me. And if you have any questions, you can ask.